It is an honor and a privilege to be a member of Narcotics Anonymous. It's an honor and a privilege to be asked to come here, Jojo, that you asked me to come here and share my experience, strength, and hope. And it is absolutely a privilege to have a message of hope, you know, of my own life from where I came from. I really am glad there's new people here. And it's so great. Look at you guys. It's beautiful. So to the new people, if you stay here, you're going to learn that Narcotics Anonymous is the place where liars come to tell the truth and where thieves come to give back. And that's what I found here. It's nothing that I ever wanted until I got here. My sponsor, I took a shower and I ate a bunch of Thai food. I'm freaking sweating all over the place. And my sponsor just texts me and he goes, dude, I'm in the Zoom meeting. I'm going to listen to you. And I was, fuck, I got to tell the truth. So there's that. But I have a sponsor and I love that guy, man. He has showed me so much. He pretty much has, he's given of himself, and he's also held a mirror up to me, you know, when I needed it. And that's sometimes the most important thing that a sponsor can do. I'm a storyteller. I don't quote the basic text. I don't make rhymes out of it. I don't know how. I have dyslexia and ADD. I can't even remember. Like if you say the first line of the sentence in one of our readings, I can finish it, but I can't. There's no way, man. I can never do that. So I'm going to tell my story, or at least parts of it. I have myself on a timer here because I do. Oh shit, it's going to have to start all over. Yeah, hear that bell? Okay, so anyway, I put myself on a timer because I need it. So I don't want to share about really a lot about drug use. I don't have time to talk about it. I have a great, funny, and just, you know, sad drug story, but I'm not going to share it with you. I'm going to assume that you guys are here for the right reason, the same reason I came here. You'll probably hear me qualify in there somewhere, but I'm not going to get that into it. But I do want to share about my early life a little bit, and, you know, how I came up. The first story I want to share about was when I was 6 years old. And when I was 6 years old, I had 5 brothers and sisters, and we lived in kind of a small house, and the boys had bunk beds in one room, and the girls had their beds in another room. And then my mom and dad, they stayed in their room with the baby. And as like a 5 or 6 year old kid, I remember I used to like to go in there and wake up my little baby sister in their room, you know, and play with her in the morning. I just loved her, you know. And one morning I went in there to wake her up, and something was wrong with her. She looked funny. So I told my mom, I said, Mom, so I went and woke my mom up. I said, Mom, something's wrong with Elizabeth. And my mom get out of bed, and she went over there and she screamed. And my dad flew out of bed, and they wrapped the baby in a blanket, and they ran out the door. They were gone in seconds. I want to tell you the kind of house that I lived in. I lived in a house where there was always an elephant in the room, in every room. I don't know how that fucking elephant fit in there, but he was in every room, man. And my parents were both alcoholics, and their parents were alcoholics. So they got what was given to them, and they gave that to us. And when my parents came home 2 hours later, they came in the house and they walked into their bedroom and they closed the door, and they came in without my sister. Now, I didn't know what happened to her, and my parents didn't know how to talk to me. They didn't know how to tell me that she was gone. My older sister told me that. And, you know, I learned 3 things that day. Don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. And I carried that through my whole life. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, through my childhood and into my you know, teenage years, and right in here to NA. So my journey here has been to learn how to talk and to tell my truth and know that it's going to be okay, and to trust, you know, trust my higher power, trust you. and to feel. And believe me, you stay clean, you're going to feel. That one you're not going to have to work on. Anyway, the first drug I ever took was sugar. And the way that this worked was, you know, we always had a big box of Cheerios in the house. And I would come downstairs and pour the Cheerios in the bowl and hit it with the sugar and pour way too much sugar on there, you know, and pour the milk in there and gobble it all down. And when I got to that final little like toxic sledge at the bottom, you know, I would just tilt it back and go flying out the door and like ride my Stingray off the roof or something, you know. And I did this because I like to feel different, like at a young age, right? And the next thing I remember that made me feel different was fear. And the way that this worked, well, so I grew up by the railroad tracks, and you know, shout out to anybody that grew up by the railroad tracks. Yeah, it wasn't a great neighborhood if you grew up by the railroad tracks. So anyway, there was this bridge over by where I used to live, and it was a culvert, like a little wash, and it was the place where the bigger kids used to go and spray paint cuss words and smoke cigarettes, you know. And I was scared of this place because I was only like 8 or 9 years old, you know. But I kept going back there, you know. And I remember I was down there one day, and one of the bigger kids said, "Hey man, if you crawl all the way up underneath this bridge, there's this little place up there right by the railroad where the train comes over, and your little body will fit in there." And I'm like, okay. And so I climbed all the way up there, and I got up there, and I'm waiting. All of a sudden, I hear the train. And by the time the train got there, the train was doing about 60 miles an hour. Right? And that whole bridge was shaking like this, and I was terrified. I mean, the train was like this far away from me, and I thought I was going to die. I came out of there, and I was like shaking for 5 minutes. And you think I would never do that again, right? Couldn't wait to do it again because it made me feel different. And the next thing that I remember that made me feel different was sex. I had sex at a young age, about 12 years old, and immediately when it was over, I remember thinking, wow, I cannot wait to do this with a real person, you know, but it was just me. So I did it over and over and over. I had a pretty good habit going, you know, because it made me feel different. Dig this, all before drugs. So, you know, drugs is just the thing. It's just the thing that happened that took me to a place where it gave me everything I wanted. And I think for a while, maybe it saved my life when I was young, because it allowed me, it gave me courage, and you know, it made me fit in, and I didn't care. I could talk to a girl, you know, and I was a shy kid, and it allowed me to forget about some of the things that happened to me when I was a kid. You know, I'm not, you know, I started smoking weed when I was 12, and I pulled the last needle out of my arm when I was 27 in 1984. I did everything, you know. I used to have to think I had a drug of choice, you know, but when I look back on it, it was like, no, whatever is there. Of course, I prefer some over other ones, but I had this identification problem when I came to Narcotics Anonymous with a certain drug. And what I found out is that was bullshit, because I'm here for recovery. And it took a while to figure that one out. Anyway, I want to fast forward to being 27 years old. And I'm 27 years old. And at 27 years old, you should have your life in front of you. You know, you should, there should be things going on in your life, you know, like you're young, and what was going on in my life is, like, for the last year, I had lived at my mom's house. My wife took my kid and she moved to another state. You know, I had gotten 6 felonies. I had broken both arms and both legs. I jumped out of buildings. I got in motorcycle wrecks. I overdosed. I woke up in the hospital. You know, I don't know. You ever wake up in the hospital? Oh, by the way, normal people don't fucking wake up in the hospital, right? If I go to the hospital, I don't wake up there. So anyway, you know, and like I had 6 felonies, and I was a mess, man. I was a freaking mess. And you know, what happened was my PO caught up with me. And he not what happens when he came over. I was at my mom's house, and I hear this car outside, and my mom lives in this apartment, and I'm standing in the back room, and I was waiting for somebody so we could go get dope or something like that. And I hear the car, the guy comes over, and I look out the peak hole, and it's my PO, and I'm like, shit. And I'm 27 years old. And I don't know what to do, man. I can't get out. There's only one door. So I run in the bedroom and I get under the covers like a little child. That's all I had, right? And a couple of minutes later, there's my PO at the foot of my bed going, get up, get up. And he throws the blanket back and sees me with my boots on and shit. And he's like, get up, right? So he checks my arms and he finds a rig and all this stuff, and he takes me to jail. I spent 3 or 4 days in jail. And he comes to get me, and he grabs me and he takes me over to his office, and he sits me across from him, and I'm sick as a dog. And he goes, you don't look too good. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Right? So you don't look good, right? And he goes, listen, the last 2 UAs you dropped in here were dirty, and the last time you didn't even show up. And he goes, I'm done. I'm not playing this game with you, and I'm going to give you 2 choices. I'm like, okay. He said, the first one is you can go to treatment, drug treatment. I'm like, I don't know what that is, drug treatment. What's that, right? And he said, well, it's up on the mountain. It's about 40 miles away, and it's rustic. And there's, like a well for water and a generator for power. And you'll spend about 4 or 5 months up there. And I'm like, well, what's the other choice? He goes, well, you can go to your prison time, 6 years. I'm like, tell me more about the drug treatment place, He's like, yeah, well, he said, it's co-ed. And I'm like, I'm in, man, right? Co-ed. And so he took me over to this detox place, and he let me detox. And I remember that I was in there and I was thinking about this co-ed, because I had a magazine one time and it was called College Co-eds, and I was thinking about this magazine that I had, it was just like these girls with these short dresses on and college and their cleavage and all that. I'm thinking, yeah, man, I'm going for that, right? And so the white van picks me up and takes me up there. About a week later, I'm all detox and stuff. And the white van takes me up there, and we pull up and we see some of these co-eds, right? There's these street chicks out there working. And I'll tell you what, man, they were all about 25 or 50 pounds underweight. And they had like these dark circles under their eyes, and they need dental work and stuff. And they look like me is what they look like, right? So anyway, I didn't get what I thought I was going to get, but I was able to stay there, right? Something happened to me. And I don't know what it was. It talks about it in our literature. It talks about when we can't live with or without drugs, and I remember the time when the drugs weren't working anymore, and that scared the hell out of me. So anyway, I'm gonna do my time here in this drug treatment program. So I did, right? And I spent 4.5 months in the drug treatment program. I worked up the levels, and I got to be where I was telling other people what to do and stuff like that. And it was time for me to leave. My PO got me a job. My sister said I could stay at her house as long as I was clean. And I had an old beat up Cadillac, and I got out that day, and I went to my job, and I went to work. And I want to kind of back up for a second. There was a guy when I went to court that I used to use with, and this was about 6 months before that. And we ended up standing next to each other waiting to talk to the judge. And his name was Chris. And he looked at me and he goes, Jimmy, we don't have to do this anymore. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, there's a place where we can go where they have meetings. He goes, there's people just like you and me, man, and they're staying clean. And look, it was like in the middle of all the shit. And I just remember feeling a spark of hope, man. Just a spark of hope. So let's get back to my first day at work. I work all day. I go take a shower at my sister's place, and then I show up at my first NA meeting. I walk into the doors of Narcotics Anonymous. And I'm going to tell you that I don't know, it wasn't what I expected, right? There was about 8 people there. And I looked around and they were hugging each other. So I sat down really quick because I don't not want to hug, right? They weren't even talking to you, just walk up to your hug. And I was like, what the fuck, man? Right? And so I'm like, don't do that to me. I am not ready. That would have been the worst thing you could do to me. That's just me. Okay. I was not ready to be touched or loved or anything at that time. So so I just sat down, and I want to tell you something, man. I had 4 months clean from the drug treatment program, and I thought I wanted to stay clean. But when I walked in that room, my disease was with me. It was right there, and it was talking to me, because I looked at everybody in the room, and there was 8 people, and none of them looked like me. Like, I had long hair, and I had this like 70s like Eagles mustache and shit, you know. And I was like, these people look like they were from the fucking PTA or something like that. And I'm like, wow, you know. I mean, I'm seriously, a dude had a tie on, right? Like a tie, like he got off work and he still had the tie on. I would have, if I ever had to wear a tie, I would throw that tie under my seat. You know, there's no way. So the guy had a tie, and the girl had a little poodle dog and shit. And I was like, my disease was like, these people can't help you. They can't help you. You know, I wanted to see a dude with a fake leg, or a girl with like a pirate patch, or some, you know, beat up hookers, or something, man, you know, something that reminded me of my life, you know. And but it was just these people. And then my disease is fucking relentless, because I looked at everybody and I realized they all had some money in their pocket. And my disease says, they have money. If you have more than $1, how can you be an addict? Like, how can you be an addict? Like, that's where my mind was at. And so I didn't talk to anybody, and I left there. But there's this thing that happens in Narcotics Anonymous, and it's called grace. It's called grace, man. And something happened that day. I did one thing right. I sat through the whole meeting and couldn't hear anything. I literally couldn't hear what they were saying. But I did one thing right, and that was that I picked up our basic text. And I brought the basic text home. And I sat in my living room, and I opened it up to the chapter that says, who is an addict? And I want to read a couple of things that I read that night. It says, we lied, stole, cheated, and sold ourselves. We had to have drugs regardless of the cost. That was me. And then it said, living skills were reduced to the animal level. Our spirit was broken. The capacity to feel human was lost. That was me. And then I read this, and this is the one that got me. We forgot how to work. We forgot how to play. We forgot how to express and show concern for others. We forgot how to feel. When I read that, I knew somebody somewhere understood. And I made a determination that I was going to continue to go back to the meetings until I found the person that wrote that. And I didn't have nowhere else to go, you know, but I kept coming back to the meetings, you know. And I'll tell you, I was angry, man. And something else happened, you know, about 3 or 4 days after I came to the meeting. Another, you know, moment of grace. And it was my friend who I told you about in court that told me about NA. He walked in the room, man. And I was so happy to see that dude, because he used like me, right? And I hung with this guy, you know, and we were like this for years, man. And I'm going to tell you, if you're new, get a buddy. Get a road dog. Get somebody that you can tell anything to, because they will save your life. And this guy used to call me up, and he was like a biker dude, you know, and we'd be going, like on a Thursday, he'd be like, hey man, you gonna go to the 7 o'clock meeting? And I'm like, yeah, not tonight. And he goes, yes, you are. I'll be there at 6:30 to get you, bitch, right? And so, you know, he knew how to talk to me, you know, he spoke my language, and he would come get me, and we would go to the meetings, man. And it was beautiful. You know. And so about 2 months after I was at the meetings, I was in a business meeting. So by this time I got 6 months clean, right? 2 months, you know, in you know, general population or the real world, right? After 2 weeks of going to the meetings, on Friday, I got paid. I was working construction. And the guy comes to give us our checks, and he gives me my check, and I run over to the bar and I cash it. And I got $400, $423. And I'm going to use. I don't know how not to. I don't know how to have this money in my pocket and not use. So what I do is, instead of, I went and took a shower, and instead of using, because addicts are creatures of habit, there was a 6 o'clock meeting. So I figured, well, I'll go to the 6 o'clock meeting and then I'll go do my run, right? And I show up at the 6 o'clock meeting, and another moment of grace. I raised my hand at the beginning of the meeting. My name is Jimmy and I'm an addict. I have $423 and I want to use. And a guy leaned over and he said, you know what, man? Talk to me after the meeting. I can help you. And I said, okay. So after the meeting, we went across the street and we got a cup of coffee at a Denny's. And he turned over a placemat and he got a pen out and he goes, do you have any bills? And I'm like, sure, I got bills. He goes, well, let's write them down. I said, well, I got to pay the rent. I got to pay child support. I had an SR22. That's like this insurance thing. And I owe somebody that floated me some money over here, like $40 so I could live. And he said, good. So he took me over to Sev, and we got a bunch of money orders, right, for all this stuff. And then I went and gave, I put them in envelopes, and some of them I had to mail. So I put those in a blue mailbox. The other ones I paid off. And when it was all done, I had all my bills paid. Now, you might think that I would be happy about that, right? Not so much, man. I worked 2 weeks. I got up at 4:30 every morning and went to work, worked my ass off. And then when I finally got my money, this guy shows me how to pay my bills. And I had $25 left. And I'm pissed. It ain't even enough to do a run now, right? And so, I just go home and go to sleep angry, right? And I wake up the next morning. It's Saturday. I'm angry. I go back to the meeting at 12 o'clock. I walk in there and they're like, bro, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, well, Gary over here, he showed me how to pay my bills, and I paid all my bills. I got $25. Everybody's fucking laughing in the whole NA meeting. And I'm like, oh my God. And I will never forget this. A guy in the back named Rob goes, bro, you got $25? I said, yeah. He goes, well, man, this group could use some coffee. So I kicked down $5 for some coffee. That's how you guys are. And I felt a little bit more part of, and I just kept coming back. Anyway, so back to this, what I was going to say is, after 2 months, they're having a business meeting and they asked me to be the secretary. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? They go, well, here's what you got to do. Actually, what happened, they're having a business meeting. The guy says, I'm cycling out of being the secretary. And all of a sudden, everyone just looks at me. And I'm like, what the fuck? And so they go, I go, what do you got to do? And they go, well, you get here before everybody else. You open the door, you make the coffee, you put that rack out there, put all the literature in the rack, make it look nice. Then you pass the basket. No, you get somebody to conduct the meeting. You pass the basket around for the 7th edition. Then you pass the H&I can around. You keep that money in separate folders. You don't steal from us. And when everybody's gone, you clean up the room and you're the last one to leave. And I was like, no way. I'm not going to do that. What do you think? I'm a chump, right? And it was like another one of those moments of grace, man, because this guy had this key to this annex building of the church. And this key it looked official. It was big and square, and it had stamped on it. It said, do not duplicate on it. I'm like, wow, that's a cool key, man. That key would look good next to my apartment key and next to my 1973 Cadillac Brougham needs a ring job smoker, that would look really good on my keychain, so I took the job, right? And I'm coming down and I'm opening the door for the meeting 2 days a week and making the coffee, and I got to tell you, man, recovery had not set in yet, okay? And I was angry. I was young in recovery. I was angry. My best friend was gone. My best friend was dope, and that was gone. And I just felt like, I was just a fish out of water, man. And I went there one day and there's this guy and he had 2 years clean, which, by the way, in 1984 was forever, okay? He had 2 years clean. His name was George. And George said, hey, man, I'm here to help you. set up the room. I'm like, okay. And so I'm in there and I'm making the coffee. He's doing the literature. I'm clanking shit around. He goes, bro, you're angry. And I'm like, I'm not angry, George. I'm not. And he goes, I'm just saying. And then he said something that might have saved my life. He said, you know, the people that come here today, he said, they might stay clean, but you are going to stay clean because you're here giving back. And I didn't understand what he meant until I started driving home. And I was driving my old Cadillac smoker home, and it hit me. See, if I wasn't there to open that door, if I wasn't there to make the coffee, the meeting wasn't going to happen. And NA wasn't going to happen that day. There was only one meeting a day back then, and that meeting wasn't going to happen. And so, man, I don't know what happened, but it gave me a completely different outlook. And the next day I got there, and I got there early, and you know, and I'll tell you what I used to do. I used to watch, right, when I was angry, I used to watch how much coffee you drank. And I would notice whether or not you put $1 in the basket. Like I was out of control, right? And so anyway, I go back to the meeting, and then I make the coffee good. I make sure there's no grounds in there, and then I fill up the coffee and cream so it looks nice, little display there. So when you go get a cup of coffee, you're like, yeah, this is cool, right? And then I come out there with the coffee pot halfway through the meeting. Hey, want some coffee? I become that guy, right? And I know I'm in service in NA, you know, and it gave me something. It frickin' gave me something, man. After 11 months, see, something happened when I was in treatment. There was a guy that came up there and he had a year clean, and he sat us all down, and he said, there was 40 of us in there. He looked around the room, and every one of us looked at bulldogged us, right? And looks at all of us, and he goes, in 1 year, not one of you will be clean. And I'm thinking, what a dick, man. What a horrible thing to say, right? So I was going to be the one to stay clean, right? So at 11 months, my disease starts working on me because I made a commitment to stay clean for a year. And at 11 months, I start reevaluating my life. And I was like, man, I still got that shitty car. I have a hard time making rent and all this stuff. And you know, I don't have a girlfriend. I'm not a movie star yet. You know, all these like unrealistic expectations you have when you get clean, you know. And you know, and I wasn't sharing that. And I just thought I had some money in a sock in my laundry. That was my bank back then, because I never had a bank account before then. Put the money in a sock, put it in the laundry, it'll be good. And I went to the meeting, and I told somebody that I was going to use. I told them that story. I said, after I get a year, I'm afraid I'm going to use. And they said, you ever been to a convention? And I'm like, no. Well, you know, I'm from Las Vegas. There's no convention here. They said, there's a convention at the end of the month in Los Angeles, and I think you should go if you can. It might do something for you. You know, it was like another one of those moments of grace, you know. And so I went home, and I had $400 in that sock, and I called. I got an airplane ticket to fly into LA on Friday after work, and I got the room, and I'm alone, man. And I fly into LA. And I go to my room, and I go up and I take a shower. I put on some nice clothes, and I come downstairs. And for the first time in my life, I see clean addicts, hundreds of clean addicts. I'd never seen that before. And there was the Mexicans with the top button, man, and they were like, yeah, man, the mustache, and they were staying clean, man, and they were having fun, and there was the brothers, and they were smoking cigarettes and laughing, and they were having fun. And then I saw people like me with the long hair and the big fat mustache, and they were there, and they were having fun. And then I saw girls, and they were beautiful, and I'm like, yeah, man, yeah. And then I went into the main meeting, because the main meeting was going to start. And this time I got up front, because I used to be the guy that always stayed in the back, you know, in case I want to walk out. And I sat in the front. And another moment of grace, man, because God put this guy up there. And every single word that he said glued me to NA. And then they say you'll hear your story eventually if you stick around here. And this guy didn't tell my story, but parts of his story fucking hit me right in the heart, man. And I completely surrendered. And when it was over, I ran to the elevator. I went up to my room, I hit my knees, and I did a third step right there. And I've been clean ever since. And God, man, I'll never forget that. And I hope if you're new, you have an experience like that, because it transformed me. And I came back and, you know, I started to like my recovery. I started working steps. I started stacking days. First 3 steps are about God, getting right with God. Steps 4 through 7 are about getting right with self, and steps 8 and 9 are about getting right with others. Steps 10, 11, and 12 are about keeping right with God, self, and others. What I really want to tell you about before I go, and I hope I can make this, man, is I want to tell you about the 9th step, because the 9th step has given me more than any of the other steps. I feel like I've gotten more from it. In particularly, I want to tell you a story about my daughter. I'm going to try to set this one up. So when my daughter was 5 years old, that's when I got clean, and her mom divorced me, and she took her and she moved away. So I was always a long distance dad, right? You know, she would come in the summer and you know, holidays and stuff like that, but we were never really close. But you know, anyway, it was like that. So when she was 16 years old, I wrote her a letter of amends and I sent it to her. And I talked to her about a week later, and her name's Ronnie. And I said, Ronnie, did you get the letter? And she said, yes. And I said, and I wanted to say, well, what do you think? But you can't do that. You see, when we make an amends, we do the best we can to say what happened, and you know, to make the amends, and we have no expectations on what they did. So she never said anything, and I thought we were good. So fast forward another 14 years, she's 30 years old, and she stops talking to me. You know, we were calling each other once a month, and all of a sudden she won't take my calls. So I'm leaving messages, hey, I'm worried about you, call me back. She's nothing. Send her a letter, call me back, blah, blah, blah. And finally I went down there to find out what was wrong. And she opened her door and she said, I'm okay. And she shut the door. And I left there and I drove back to Vegas, and I got with Billy, my sponsor, and I told him what happened, and I got with my guys, because I have a group of guys that I share with, and what I realized is that I had to come to a place where if she never said, if we never talked again, that I could love her just like that, like let her be who she was. And as soon as I got there, she called me. And she said, Dad, I'm ready to talk. So I got in the car and I drove to LA, and we found a little park bench and we sat there, and she looked at me and she said, I need to know some things. And I'm like, sure. She said, I need to know what happened to me before, you know, when I lived with you, when I was little. She said, I've been going to therapy for 3 years, and I always think everyone's going to leave me. So I needed to tell me what happened. And so I had to tell her what happened, and I had to tell her the truth. And the truth was, I used to leave her everywhere. I used to leave her at her aunt's house. I used to take her to my mother's house, and I would leave for a week. You know, she never knew when I was going to come back. You know, and I told her that that's what I did. You know, and then I had this memory about a time when I was I grabbed my mom's car. I grabbed my daughter. I put her in the car seat, and I was just going to go over to this apartment to get some Coke, right? And I ran over to I got to the apartment. I left her in the car. I ran up the stairs. I got the Coke, and we started smoking freebase. And as soon as I took that hit, I was locked in, and I couldn't leave. And every time I would take a hit, I would go back over to the window and I would look and make sure that she was still in the car, you know, and I would see like the child's seat with her head on it. That's all I could see. And I spent an hour there till it was all gone. And I left that apartment. I went down, and then when I was walking up to the car, I was terrified of what I might see but there was my little daughter, and she was asleep. And I started the car and I drove off, and I looked at her and I noticed that there were dried tear streaks all over her face. from where she woke up, and I wasn't there. And she looked at me because she woke up and she looked at me, and then she looked out the window, and there were no more tears. There were no more fucking tears after that. And so the gravity of what I did hit me on that park bench that day. And I looked at her and I said, sweetie, I am so sorry. If there's anything that I could ever do to make this different, I would, but I can't. And she said, yeah. I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, I don't know what to do either, but I still want to be your daughter. And I'm like, good. And so we continued to have this relationship going back and forth and calling each other. And we were trying. It was kind of clunky, but we were trying. And then finally she got pregnant. And when she got pregnant, she like warmed up to me, and she started calling me more, and she wanted me to be part of this baby's life. And she called me one night and she said, Dad, I'm going to go right now and have the baby. And I said, okay, I'm on my way. And by the time I got to LA, she had had the child. And there she was in a room with Sierra, with this little bundle, this new life. And she said, you want to hold her? And I said, yeah. And so I held this child, and my heart opened. My heart opened, man. And I felt generations behind me in that room while I held her. You want to talk about that moment of grace? God giving me that after all that? So dig this. About 9 months later, I'm at the house, and she's got Sierra is in the big old like wagon train pen thing in the garage, and then my daughter is cooking dinner in the kitchen, and I'm in the dining room, and I can see both of them, right? And and Sierra starts crying. And so Ronnie shuts off the stove, puts the spoon down, and comes in there, and she doesn't pick her up. She gets right down on the ground with her. And she says, I'm right here, sweetheart. I'm in here cooking dinner for us. And then the baby stops crying, and she gets up and she goes back to cooking dinner. And here's what I see. I see my daughter healing through this relationship, something that I couldn't give her. You want to talk about grace? I got to witness that. All right, I want to get a little current, okay? Whew. 7 weeks ago, I had a complete knee replacement, okay? Hey, let me just tell you something. Getting old is not for sissies, all right? I had a complete knee replacement, and wow. And man, so I'm going to physical therapy, and I had to take pain meds, and it was more pain meds than I ever took ever, because I might have had to take one pain med or something like that. But man, this was a real deal. And so here's what I did. I talked to my sponsor. I gave the pills to my wife. I never saw the bottle. Look, I probably shouldn't even share about this shit because it's an outside issue, but I'm telling you, this happened to me, okay? And so I was terrified. And so I give my wife the pills. I talk to my sponsor. I'm in contact with him all the time. And then I take a notepad and I put it on the table. And every time I take something, I write it down. And this worked for me. And let me tell you, my disease doesn't want me to write shit down. Isn't that weird? With 36 years clean, my disease says, you don't have to write that down. Wow. Yeah, I think I do. I think I do, especially if you're telling me I don't, right? And anyway, I was able to go through it and get off those, and I'm in recovery with my knee, and I'm in recovery here. And I'll share this, and I'll shut it down. I have a beautiful life, you guys. I have a beautiful life. It's wonderful. And even at 64 years old with a new knee and all that stuff, here's what Narcotics Anonymous has given me. I would rather be me than anyone else. I would rather be me, right? And that is something, right? Because I never wanted to be me. So I want to share this thing about it. It's called kintsugi. Kintsugi. It is a Japanese word, and it means a golden rejoining. and it comes from the 15th century. And what was going on back then is they had these priceless vases or vases, and sometimes they would break. And this guy figured out how to put them back together with gold lacquer, like real gold. And so he would infuse the gold with the glue, and he would put these together. And they were actually, these broken masterpieces were made more beautiful by this process of putting them back together. And that's what happens in Narcotics Anonymous, is we get put back together. We're this broken, beautiful vase. And Narcotics Anonymous is that gold that is in the cracks, man. Look it up. It's really cool. Anyway, I just want to tell you that after 36 years clean, I love you, and I still need you to love me. That's my time.
Thanks, Jimmy, for sharing. That was awesome.
Everyone
Thanks,
can
Jim.
unmute.
Thank you.
Amazing message.
Fantastic.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy.